Aloha and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books off the shelf, page through them, blow the dust off them, and remind ourselves why it is we love them so. My name's Tom Gaea. Joining me today, we've got Tony Pasculi.
Thanks again, Tom.
And we are wrapping up the John Varley trilogy today with Demon.
Demon, the third book, Titan, Wizard, Demon.
And the standard question, why does this rank as one of your favorite books?
That, now that we're talking about it in the context of the trilogy, it's kind of low on the list for me. But the trilogy is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. And I think the book holds up as a really satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. But it is not, as I think I mentioned before, my favorite of these three books.
It is certainly the most action-packed of the three.
It is. And it sacrifices a lot for action, and it sacrifices a lot for theme, which is, I think, one of your original complaints when we mentioned this briefly.
Yeah.
In what were we talking about? Have space equal travel. Yeah.
So my recollection of this from the first time I read it was that in this book, there were a couple of things that just bothered me immensely, apparently, because that's all I recall from it. One was that the idea that certain things could be genetically engineered was just pushed beyond any credible limits. Like having flying ramjets that are organically grown. No, it just can't. And then the other, like you said, was the theme.
Yeah.
That it was just so thematically limited and driven to this same, little circle of premises over and over again. I don't remember why. I mean, certainly I stand by we have gone past the limits of credulity with genetic engineering. But the other, I don't know. I mean, I really enjoyed the read through this, and whatever bitterness I had carried for all these years was certainly misplaced.
Well, that's good. I said it's not my favorite of the three, but it's still a wonderful, wonderful book. It's amazing. It's imaginative. It is epic in scope. It is incredibly satisfying conclusion to a trilogy, which is something that's hard to achieve. It's so easy to start a trilogy with an incredible world and characters, and it's so hard to bring it to a narrative close. And I think Varley does that very, very well. But I think it does sort of lurch into ludicrousness at times with the theme. And you really have to just kind of set that aside and go, okay, I'm along for the ride.
Yeah, which I did this time through. And, there was a few places where I had to pause and roll eyes, but, just keep going forward, let the story carry me along. And,
So one of the things we mentioned at the tail end of the last podcast is that Gaea, who is the entity who is this, god of this wheel, who is the wheel in a sense, maybe, although we find out that that's not true, uses a sort of puppet of her creation to talk to humans. And in the first two books, it's a little old lady who could have come out of an Agatha Christie novel. And in this book, it's a 50-foot tall incarnation of Marilyn Monroe. Mm-hmm. She is a monster. She is a movie monster on a scale of comparable to King Kong. Yeah, I think deliberately so. Yeah.
There's a memorable scene in there with King Kong, between King Kong and Marilyn Gaea.
Yeah. So it's kind of, you just really have to, set your whatever misgivings aside and just go, okay, all right, this is an epic battle between Marilyn Monroe and Sirocco, our hero from the previous two books.
Now, 50-foot tall Marilyn Monroe, I got no problem with. You can genetically engineer one of those.
I'm okay with the genetic engineering of all the weird creatures because we know that, one, her technology is so advanced, and two, I think it goes beyond genetic engineering. She mentions in Wizard that one of the satellite brains has a particle accelerator, that they all have particle accelerators.
Yeah.
So she can synthesize new elements at will. So she's got a lot of physical control over her creations. And
now this is something that actually I had to waste some brain power on throughout, and particularly in the third book. So we have the introduction of the Iron Masters?
The Iron Masters,
right,
yes, who eat babies.
They eat babies, but they actually manufacture things, right? And there's some honest to gosh manufacturing going on, railways and whatnot, for which they're mining the mountains and to get the ore out and smelt all these traditional things. So 3 million years ago,
Yep.
when the initial Gaia was forming herself, she did it in such a way that she had veins of usable ores hidden inside mountains of rock. Why?
Okay, I thought about this, and my conclusion was that because we know how they reproduce, they basically take over a moon of a planet,
Right.
extract all the nutrients, and then throw away what's left. So I assumed that they would extract all the valuable ore at that time also, just in case they need it for something.
Right, but
And then they might clump it together so it's easier to get at later when they need it.
buried in a mountain doesn't sound like easier to get at.
Well, I don't know. Where would you put it?
I don't know, honestly. It seemed so. And she makes a big deal in the first book. Talking about once we have left, once we have actually expanded, we have all the mass we're ever going to have.
Yeah.
Which has got to be true-ish.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned in the last episode, they've got particle accelerators, so they can refab stuff. But it just seems like if you were going to have reserves of iron, that you would have them stored in the iron bin, not buried as ore inside of mountains of stone, where if you ever did need them, you would have to fabricate a race of beings to go extract it.
I don't know. I think to me, this is not a sticking point for me. I think to me,
It's not a sticking point. It's just a minor annoyance.
Where would the iron bin go? Because Gaea internally is a series of lands, and these lands are shaped for their inhabitants. And so, there isn't just like a big Costco. Not one of them is set aside as a Costco where you'd have an iron bin. So it makes sense to put them in the lands.
Well, at least not in Gaia.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I don't know about her siblings and her offspring.
It's interesting because this book was written after Ringworld, which was a sort of pivotal book in the science fiction genre. And Gaea is in stark contrast to Ringworld in that Ringworld, when it has valleys and mountains and whatever, they are surface features only. Yeah, and if you look at the underneath of Ringworld, you can see where the mountains go up and where the valleys come down. They are completely artificial, whereas Gaea seems to me more organic in that there's a wheel and it's filled with stuff, and she makes the features with stuff. So to make mountains, she's got to have granite. Yeah, she's got to make her own granite to make those mountains. It's not just a sheet of plastic with a veneer of grass over it or whatever. Yeah. All right. Sidebar. What were we talking about before that?
What were we talking about before that?
So we were talking about fantastic creations. There's a lot of fun stuff in here. You're not a big fan of the ramjets, the buzz bombs, the Luftmortar. I love them.
They're fantastic in terms of being there as villains.
Yes.
They just completely stretch, or beyond stretch. They're on the far side of, it's just not possible to grow something with that degree of precision. It's just not possible to grow a turbine engine that would function well. And these function well, right? Because they engage in dogfights with humanity's best technology to some degree of success. It's just not possible to grow bullet creatures consistent enough to fit through a rifle barrel and be fired at distance with accuracy. Okay, but moving past that, she somehow did it.
I'm reluctant to say that things aren't possible with sufficiently advanced technology. And that's one of the things that Gaea is. She's, the Clark's Law.
Yeah, and she's magic.
She is. She's basically magic. And it's interesting that is in Wizard, there's a quote which I highlighted, actually, if I can bring it back up here again. We didn't talk about it last time. But it was interesting, and I highlighted it for a different reason, as sort of one of the failings of prediction. Okay, in my day, this is Sirocco saying, they were sure they'd have the genetic code cracked in a few more years. We were going to wipe out all physical disease and genetic conditions, and nobody thought we'd be solving psychological problems anytime soon. So just the opposite happened. And clearly we know, 30 years on from when this book was written, no, that's not how it happened. We still have, psychology is just, we're more and more realizing we know nothing. And we did crack the genetic code, and we are devising genetic solutions for physical diseases. So in fact, Varley got that exactly backwards. So his perspective is that sufficiently advanced genetic technology is going to be so far beyond our comprehension that literally anything is possible. And we happen to be in a world where it isn't beyond our comprehension because we actually live in that universe where it is a little bit more comprehensible. But I still buy it. The Gaea is way, way beyond us, and she can synthesize kerosene with plants and whatnot.
Yeah, why not? Well,
Yeah.
I remember, again, that was a serious sticking point for me back in the day when I read
Yeah.
these the first time. And now it's just, the sort of thing I look and say, okay, I'm going to have to swallow this. It'll be a little hard,
Yeah.
but I have to swallow this to move on.
That's one of the beauty of coming back to a thing for the second time, as I'm realizing I just watched Game of Thrones again. And the first time through is just like, I cannot get past this. This is so bad and wrong. And then you're like, well, I know that's bad and wrong, but, and then you just move,
roll on over it.
Just roll on over it. Yep.
But yeah, the big bombers, Luftmortars?
Luftmortars, yes.
There's one passage where we're inside the head of one of them that's on a mission, and I just love it. He's flying along and he's not worried. Oop, that base is burning. Oh, I'm not worried. I'm just going to keep doing the mission. And it wasn't until, he was just a couple of 100 meters in the air away from crashing that it finally occurred to him, this might not work.
Yeah, and then...
Yep.
All right, so speaking of Luftmortars, my other favorite villain in this is the death snakes that fuel the zombies. What did you think of that?
That was horrific in so many ways. Not that zombies are ever a pleasant thing.
Yeah.
But the fact that, Gaea, there's no afterlife. You can't actually reanimate dead tissue. That's kind of true, but you can send little parasites, I guess, is the best thing to call a death snake, to infest the body, to give it a semblance of motion and a semblance of brain power. And
Yeah.
And the Luther, we get to spend some time with Luther. That's a fun zombie character.
Yeah. I think this is my favorite incarnation of zombies outside of the girl with all the gifts. That still remains my top tier zombie pick, but this is good. And that's saying something because this is not a book about zombies. Zombies are just another thing.
Just another thing, yep.
Of so many things, 50-foot tall Marilyn Monroe, living ramjets and zombies, and Iron Masters and the Titanites we've already seen, the Angels. It all comes back. Yeah.
Now, one of the interesting things that I like playing with, so most of the things that we're introduced to throughout the course are creatures that are based on human fantasy and human mythology.
Yes.
And we know that they're young because Gaea had no way to get human fantasy and human mythology until the advent of radio and television,
Yep.
And I honestly, I think he plays just a little bit loose. I think he gives them more history than they deserve. Whatever the point is, the Titanide race is 150 years old, or they give us a number at some point that I think was
Something
slightly
like that.
generous. But she's 3 million years old. The structure is 3, or at least we've been told she's 3 million years old.
Yes.
There is a shortage of genuinely weird alien things that she's had 3 million years to develop and evolve and adapt. And, we got a few of them in the first book.
Yeah.
But pretty much everything in book 2 and everything in book 3 are things that are based on stuff she's trying to emulate from modern day Earth.
Yeah. So now we need to drop a major spoiler so we can talk about that, which is that Gaea that we're dealing with in this book is not 3 million years old.
Right.
She's 50,000 years old.
She's 50,000 years old. And this is something that really bothered me at the time, because it's when she's talking to Chris. So Gaea is talking to Chris, and this is near the beginning of the third book. Of course I'm cruel, Gaea muttered. There is no possible way for you to get the perspective on my cruelty. I'm 50,000 years old, Chris. Sirocco is just over 100 and already feels things eating at her soul. Can you imagine what I must feel? Chris says, you mean 3 million? Not, of course. What was I thinking? You can go back now, Chris. But that's something she lets slip that turns out to actually be true.
Yeah.
She is not 3 million year old Gaea.
Yeah.
She's 50,000 year old Gaea. But even for her, so 50,000 less 200, is 49,800 years of running the hub before she starts getting radio and television communication. It just seems like there ought to be, and maybe I'm just
we don't have that history. We get some brief allusions to entire races that have come and gone.
Right.
But we don't see evidence we don't see 50,000 years of evidence other than geological stuff. Yeah. We know that there was a war with the satellite brains, and that had some consequences for the landscape. We know that one of the satellite brains died.
Well, we think we know that.
Yeah. Well, yes, yeah.
And that's another big bomb that gets dropped there at the end. You know, she did not kill Oceanus. Oceanus just
Stop functioning.
stopped functioning.
Yeah.
It didn't go rogue. There was
Yeah.
no war.
Yeah.
She actually did destroy Ringmaster.
Yes, yeah. It was Gaea. It was Gaea all along. It
was
sung
Gaea
to the
all
tune
along.
of Agatha all along.
Yeah. And her fragmented brain, right? So she was losing it, apparently. You know.
Yeah, and okay, so we talk about escalations again. So book 1, you get to go on a quest and meet a god. Book 2, you get to decide that God is evil and overthrow that, or try to make a plan to overthrow that God. Book 3, God goes insane and comes down to Earth to engage in a physical war with our heroes.
And here we see her obsession with war,
Yes.
Finally come to fruition.
Yeah.
Because originally she had bred the Titanides and the angels to be adversaries just so she could watch war.
Yes. So she could practice war.
And ostensibly because she was afraid of mankind. But now what we see is she wants a war. She wants the wizard, the demon rather, to come at her. She wants there to be an altercation, and she doesn't think Rocky's going to win, but she wants somebody to win. So she's actually put Rocky's heir into motion before we ever get started with this.
And she sets up some rules, and she's agreed to play by those rules. And Rocky deduces these rules and agrees to play by them also. Because if they don't play by these rules, then there's no way that Rocky can defeat Gaea. Gaea is far too powerful. It's only because she's agreed to sort of handicap herself that she can. And so Sirocco has to buy into all this movie myth stuff also. And that's why she has her skywriters write Surrender Dorothy in the air over, Pandemonium, as Gaea's city is called. Yeah. But we do learn in this book that Gaea has learned something about war, not only for her tactics on the ground, but she wipes out Earth.
That is just, and again, this is stretching some bounds of credulity, that the amount of influence that she's able to wield over the political strata of Earth and whatnot, but she pulls it off. And, Earth descends into a tepid nuclear war, I guess.
Yeah.
Just, the occasional nuking every few weeks, but it goes on for, 7 years?
Something like that, yeah. And then whenever it dies down, it turns out that Gaea is just lobbing a random nuke somewhere at someone she knows will respond, just to keep it going again. Yeah.
Part of her goal is to get the military ship out of there so she's no longer any physical threat. But then she also starts taking in refugees.
Yes.
Which might seem like a really kind, neighborly thing to do, but it's crazy guy we're talking about here.
It's all part of her plan.
Yeah, and she dumps them, basically naked and alone into one concentrated area with not much to offer, hoping to create a cesspool, hoping to create Thieves' World.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. She needs extras. She needs extras for her movie epic.
Yep.
You can't have a battle scene without lots and lots of NPCs to die. Yeah. Yeah. She's pretty evil.
Yes, she's good at that.
Yeah. So what is this town called? The cesspool town.
It had a weird name that did not stick in my memory. Started with a B.
It started with a B. Yeah. So we had Titan Town for the Titanites, and we have Pandemonium for Gaea, and then we had this other weird city called something with a B.
Yeah. Short of searching for it, I don't know.
Okay. Well, shoot. But that is a wonderful. It's very reminiscent of Bartertown in the.
Yep.
It's like there are no rules. Anything. Well, there's one rule: kill or be killed. And you can buy anything, you can sell anything. There's a market for human flesh. There's a slave trade. There's a sex trade. And within this town, there's a couple of enclaves that have been set up. There's the vigilantes, who are a mixed gender group of people who are just like tough and sort of patrol the streets at their own peril to try to establish some sense of law. And there's what are the women called?
Free females?
Free females, okay, yeah. Which you have to be a woman to join.
This is very Sin City.
Yeah.
Got the
Yes,
enclave of the armed women.
Yeah.
They are their own power, and you don't mess with them.
Yeah. It's fun. Varley creates so much stuff that a lesser writer would just go, oh, what a great idea I could just tell all kinds of stories in this city. But it's just like, it's one piece of the puzzle for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, this is something I meant to say about Wizard last time. Once you have a wizard in a world, you could write all kinds of stories with a wizard. you wouldn't have to go right away to let's kill God. Yeah, but he does. He sets off, and it starts off as this is going to be a wizard adventure, a little travelogue, and there's this other sinister thing underneath it the whole time that just really, pushes it to the next level. So that's one of the things I love about these books and admire about Varley as a writer.
Yep, it evolves and balloons in a way that
Yes.
I can't think of a parallel.
Yeah.
That does that. I mean, Lord of the Rings is epic and grand, but from the beginning
Yes.
what the plot is, and there are no really big secrets or changes or twists to that.
The equivalent that I think of all the time is the escalation from Alien to Aliens, and unfortunately, it stops there with that franchise.
Yeah.
That you go from one monster to a nest of monsters and a queen. And it's a wonderful escalation, and it shifts genres, as we see with this trilogy, from a sort of a haunted house movie almost, with a creature stalking the crew in a very tight quarters, to a military action movie with still generous dollops of horror. And the same thing here. We go through this sort of progression of genres, of science fiction to fantasy travelogue to epic war movie. Yeah.
Now, I talked a little bit last time about magic in terms of
Yes.
sufficiently advanced technology being indistinguishable from
Yes.
magic.
Yes.
Now, in this one, we get into, there's magic. There's not really another way to classify it. But Gabby, in her altered existence,
Yeah.
and there's even a line in there that says, as Gabby learned to survive and began to focus on learning the ways of magic.
Yes.
Okay, well, maybe that means magic, maybe that means the technology. But the Gabby entity does things throughout the book that are hard to rationalize.
Yes, she does.
So the first encounter we have between her and Rocky, okay, it's a dream in air quotes, right? There's some sort of psychic bond thing going on, except there were footprints left.
Yes.
The second time, Rocky comes home to find her own body still there, but she has trouble entering it. The third time when she comes home, there's no body. She's been gone. She's physically been gone.
Yeah.
And they're teleporting around the room. Okay, this is teleportation. So there's something going on, whether we want to call it teleportation or magic or whatnot. Gabby's able to do these things after a few years in her non-corporeal state or whatever state she's in, that Gaea, Marilyn Monroe, 50,000 years of experience, is not exploiting, right? We never
Yes.
once have teleportation when it's involved with Gaea,
Yeah.
even when it would be really to her advantage.
Yeah.
Pandemonium stalks around the rim at the speed of her two monstrous legs.
Yes.
And trains.
Part of that is maybe that Gaea, because of her upbringing, is of less imagination or wasn't forced through constraints to exploit those sorts of things the way that Gabby was. She had to learn to survive in the Red Line. She was supposed to die in the Red Line. She was supposed to be consumed, and she didn't. She hid and she learned. And I think the other thing is that Gaea has agreed to abide by certain rules to make it a fair fight. Yeah, it can't be an unfair fight because that's part of her movie that she's creating, and also a way to give Sirocco a chance. I did think a lot about the justification for Gabby doing some of the things that she does. And I think Varley alludes to this, although it doesn't explain the footprints, is that we know that there's a copy of Sirocco up in the hub, and there's a copy of Gabby up in the hub. And so the copy of Gabby can talk to the copy of Sirocco, and basically it can be like VR. She can just simulate everything and then just pipe that information as a memory back into Sirocco, which we know that there's a direct link there also with, I forget at what point Snitch comes out. Is that in book 2 or book 3?
I was trying to remember that during the last episode if Snitch was fair game or not.
Yeah.
Snitch is a very important part of book 3, right? Because she gets a lot of her intel. Rocky gets a lot of her intel from torturing the poor little thing. The poor little brain dragon.
Anyway, so forget Snitch for a side. Well, we know through the example of Snitch can communicate directly with Gaea. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's some sort of organic radio or something happening. And so it is then, knowing that, it is then feasible to also think that Gaea on the surface, Sirocco on the surface can somehow communicate with Gabby in the hub or vice versa, or with a virtual copy of herself. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're also, it goes beyond that because they teleport into angel nests
Yes.
and set up very complex plans, as part of the.
And they're physically there because the angels agree to have sex with them.
Right.
It's sort of a
There's a symbolic sex, and
Yeah.
the angels can see them and talk to them. The Titanides can see them,
Yes.
Even when other humans sometimes can't and sometimes
Yes.
can. Yeah, there was a little bit of dodginess there,
I
which you had to have some way to set up these events in order for this incredibly intricate and long odds plan to succeed.
Yeah, I'm willing to give Varley the benefit of the doubt here on the either he has an actual something worked out which he just didn't bother to explain, or that he could, but enough of it is sufficiently worked out that doesn't bother me. It's okay to have some mysteries. There are other authors who are so clearly haven't done the work. They're just like, this wouldn't work, and you can't convince me that you think it would if you thought about it for 2 seconds. And I don't think that's Varley. So,
No.
yeah.
One of the things that really surprises me is that he hasn't written more in
In this trilogy.
this. Yeah, because like you said, there's no shortage of. You could have the Tales of the Wizard. You could. There's just no limit to the stories that could be spun within the confines of the existing trilogy.
I admire Varley for that in a way that I don't admire Frank Herbert for the Dune sequels.
Okay, I can. He went in, he wrote a really amazing trilogy, and then was smart enough to walk away and leave it alone.
Yeah.
Not to keep dabbling in
because
it.
if you did come back and just like do other stories, they would be lesser. They couldn't match this.
No.
Wizard succeeds because it's not another adventure. It's another adventure that escalates the entire story and leads to the third book.
Yeah.
So you could open it up to the shared world and let other people stomp around in there with their muddy boots and write a bunch of, banal adventures inside of Gaea.
Yeah, but think of all the things that we've talked about. It's like, what about other races? What about the last 50,000 years? What about the 2.5 million years before that? What about teleportation? What about
Yeah.
all the whatabouts that we're talking about? These could all be full-featured,
They
robust
could be.
stories. Could be.
There's a reason. So like a prequel trilogy would be interesting. Mm-hmm. But if you had a prequel trilogy, it wouldn't intersect with humanity, and it would lose a lot by that. Yeah, you no longer have
That's
human
true.
characters.
Yeah.
And it's hard to have. I guess you could have a sequel trilogy, but
Well, it's one of the things that I found a little bit interesting is, again, so the current Gaea, it turns out, was the previous wizard.
Yes.
And she's been kicking around 50,000 years-ish. We don't know what she originally was, and somebody, at some point there's a line that says, don't even know if her species still exists within the wheel. But it's odd that something that had an identity ended up embracing humanity as an all-new identity, right? First she was the housewife, matronly look, and then she was Marilyn Monroe. That she just so identified with this new mode of existing that she just recast herself in that role.
well, that makes sense to me because humanity is the first other intelligent, truly alien creature that Gaea gets to experience. Because I assume that the wizard is one of the previous incarnation's creations,
Well,
right? Because there are
But
no
it
other.
could be.
There's no other intelligent life in our solar system. There's the Titans
at the moment.
and there's humans. Yeah, there could have been before. There could have been a civilization on Mars, and now it's gone. But
But again, the creators, what we're given in the first book, and now that you get to the end of the third book, there's reason to doubt a lot of the things that we think we learned from Gaea in the first book.
Yeah.
But the creators are old enough that she's never seen one.
yes,
They were gone before she was born 3 million years ago.
yeah,
If we're going to take her word on her age.
yeah.
I forget where I was going with that.
You were going with, is there other intelligent life in our solar system?
Yeah. But I lost it. Whatever it was. Never mind. Moving on.
Anyway, my assumption was that there was not and never had been, and therefore every incarnation of Gaea, including the original, only had for company what it created. And there's a limit to that. You can create interesting things and give them free will, but as we saw with this incarnation of Gaea and creating the Titanides, they're just not very inventive. And like when she tries to create the angels and the Titanides and put them at war, they don't develop new strategies.
Yeah.
And so human beings being utterly alien are fascinating, I think. They're unpredictable. They're weird. They generate new ideas. Gene is there for all of 5 seconds before he's giving the Titanides new strategies for war, right? So, yeah. So that fascination makes sense to me. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. I got a couple of... so I think Varley, while he is entirely his own unique thing, has a sort of a debt or an influence to other authors. Mentioned Ringworld and Niven. I think this definitely is an homage to Ringworld in a way. And there's some Heinleinian stuff creeping into this third book. There's a thing in Heinlein where there are people who very swiftly know if you are right or if you are wrong, that people form these instant lifelong friendships in Heinlein novels. You see that in Moon is a Harsh Mistress with Manny and Wyo, or even Manny and Mike for that matter.
Yep.
And here we have the same thing where in the body and the Titanides, they can just look at a human being and tell, they can assess if they are good people or bad people. And one of the first suggestions for quelling the unrest in this cesspool town, which neither of us can remember the name of, is just let the Titanites go through and kill all the bad people.
Yep. And the Titanites are actually annoyed that Rocky doesn't let them do that.
Yeah.
Because it's obvious they're going to end up doing it at some point.
Yep. You're going to kill them eventually, but you
Yep.
got to let them do the thing. No pre-crime here.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. But that just strikes me as very Heinlein. You know, all of his characters are so, I mean, some of them are actually wrong, so they're smug, but they're just so certain. They're just so morally certain about things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now that moral certainty, that was something else that there was a little subplot in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Nova has some issues. She's a young woman with some issues.
Yes.
Everyone from the Coven is got some issues, I think. But she discovers that her mother has been having sex with a man.
Yes.
Gasp. And this prejudice of hers, you know, she doesn't cut her mother out of her life, but she effectively stops being the daughter, right?
Yeah,
She changes the relationship. But at one point, one of her close Titanite friends was like, I'm not willing to let you ride me anymore.
Yeah.
You're fine, you know, we can work together, but I don't want to hang out anymore. And she's like, why? She's like, there's something black, there's something dark growing in your head.
Yes.
She's like, is it about my mom? He's like, well, that's part of it. You know what? Go see the young kid. He's a young one, and he probably can't see it yet. And she's like, oh my God, all of the Titanites can see this.
Yes.
So she becomes ostracized from Titanite society, with the exception of the one who's too young.
Yeah.
She's like, oh no, I'll forgive my mom. I'll forgive my mom.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it's the right idea, but certainly there's no reason to think that she's meaning that, right? She's feeling
Yeah.
a sting from a loss, not a soul-rending thing. But the Titanite's like, I don't think it'll be enough.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, we set up this beautiful bigotry-based conflict where, again, she's got to somehow confront something in herself and make a fundamental change. It goes away, just poof.
Yeah.
There's no journey, there's no struggle. It simply goes away, right? A chapter later, and everything is peaches and cream again, and she's fine with men.
There's a bit of a struggle, and it's quick. I'll grant you that it's quick, and most human beings could not make an adjustment that large that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
There's another character who does that also, which is Conal, or Connell. I don't know how it's pronounced.
Yeah, but we get
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
if not decades. Now, it could have happened overnight, but you know,
Yeah.
we see Connell get his ass handed to him by Rocky, and
Yeah.
then the next time we see him is decades later.
Yeah.
In Humantown.
So Nova's is a little bit like that also. It's just that it's a couple of discrete experiences and not all from Rocky. Conal gets it one time from Rocky and Hornpipe. They just smack him down hard, leave him to die, which turns out to be an oversight. But there's a passage I highlighted, which is a zombie angel kidnaps the golden child and is flying away with him. And Nova says, why don't we just let him go? And Sirocco slaps her so hard she knocks her to the floor and says, kid, this is so Heinlein, kid, I've taken all I'm going to take from you. This is your first and last warning. You will grow up damn fast and you will join the human race, or I'm likely to kill you accidentally. And I'd hate to do that because Robin is my friend. We will now discuss how to save the life of a human being who happens to be your brother, and you will speak only when spoken to.
Yep.
So that happens before the other thing, right?
Yes.
I believe so. So I think Nova has that in her head first. And then that other passage you mentioned, which is one of my favorite parts of this book, actually. I'm surprised I didn't mention it. Because I have had arguments like that where someone says, hey, you know what? I don't really kind of want to, I'm seeing something negative in you and I don't like it. And the impulse is to go, no, you don't understand. It's because this is like, I don't care why. I'm saying this is bad and I don't want to be around it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And worse, what the Titanite tells Nova is you're nurturing it. You're enjoying it. You're letting this darkness grow inside of you rather than dealing with it or cutting it out. Yeah. And so I think it's the second thing there. Because she does push back quite a bit, pretty hard, and also because this Titanite is so important to her that she takes a really hard look at herself, and she's already had a chance to grow a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I just felt that was a missed opportunity to actually see that development, not to just have the development have happened.
That's fair. This is okay, and again, this is why I think this book, in spite of its length and epicness and action, is less satisfying in the first book, is because the first book we spend so much more time with the characters, and here we just literally don't have time.
Yeah, there's an awful lot going on.
Yeah.
Now, you were talking about parallels between other authors. One of the things that I thought of was Zelazny.
Yes.
In particular, when the army is marching on Pandemonium, we have this extended sequence about the army is attacked, we lost these many people, the army is attacked, we lost this many people. It reminded me of Corwin's March on Amber. Where it's just this constant, litany of lost 12,000, lost 200, lost 5,000, lost,
Yeah.
It was the same sort of a thing between Rocky's own deliberate depredations of her forces and, Gaea's attacks.
Yeah. One of the things I appreciate is that Varley actually used the word, and Sirocco, as Varley's mouthpiece, uses the words decimate correctly.
He uses it in its literal sense, yeah.
Yeah. 1/10 are gone, yeah.
Yeah. I love that first meeting with her generals.
Yes.
It's like, you will fire 2 people from every group, cohort, whatever the smallest unit was. You take the 2 worst and they're out. That's it. We're down 10%.
Yes.
We're going to take another 10% and we're going to leave them behind as the home garrison. They don't get any of the armor. New weapons go to them, but we're marching with everything that we've already got.
So another thing in this book, talking about parallels, not between other authors here, but other characters, and Chris and Robin are such great characters, but a large amount of time has elapsed. So Chris and Robin come back. Actually, Chris is still here. Chris has stayed here, and he has changed significantly. Mm-hmm. Robin comes back trailing Nova. And it turns out that Nova functions very much like a younger version of Robin in the context of this book.
Yep.
And Conal, who is a very interesting character who has been groomed from childhood to be an assassin of Sirocco, his mind warped by comic books, is sort of feels like a version of Chris to me. And Chris and Robin kind of get sidelined as a result of focusing on these new characters of Conal and Nova. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that was, again, fascinating. The idea that Gaea could manipulate the comic book publishing industry in such a way to get these comic books into the hand of Jean's great-grandson?
Yeah, Jean's great-great-grandson or whatever it is, however many it is.
In order to try and create, and on the one hand, it's like, okay, that is such a slim thread, that buggers belief. But on the other hand, it's like, how many of those slim threads did she spin?
Yes.
Right? And again, opportunities just boggle the mind for other things that could be written, things that she tried and didn't materialize in a timely fashion.
There's that thread and the war, the way Varley talks about the war, are both feel a little glib for my taste. But he just has to get through so much so fast. It's just like, just trust me. Just go with this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it's a better story if it happens this way.
It's a better story if it happens this way. Let's get to the good stuff. But there's a lot you got to know. Yeah. So.
Yeah, this was fun. The battle scenes, the classic misdirection, getting the little kid out the back door while there's attacks going on 3 sides.
Yeah. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful book. And like I say, it's just the most satisfying conclusion to a trilogy I think I can recall. I can't think of a better trilogy ending than this.
Yeah, well, again, at the end, Gabby lifts Sirocco bodily
Yep.
through the air up into the smoke. We're seeing an ability here that hasn't ever manifested before in the hands of the
Yeah.
much more experienced Gaea. A little, not that it was not used in any meaningful way, right?
Yeah.
It was simply an alternate way to get her up there. But still, what a neat trick that would have been to pull out numerous times at numerous critical points.
Well, Gabby couldn't do it while Gaea was alive because she was the focus of Gaea's attention.
Right.
And yeah, so once the golden child becomes the focus of Gaea's attention, Gabby has more freedom of movement. But the other thing is, so remember in the first book, they talk about this either in the first book or the second book, that when people come up to the hub, it's the second book, it's a wizard. When people come up to the hub, they have this continuous experience of landing in Gaea and riding the elevator up, but that's not actually true. On the elevator
Right.
up, she knocks them out, and then she does stuff to them, and then implants some false memory. So they have a continuous memory, but in fact they did not.
And that actually, so in the last book, we were talking about Gabby's soul ascending to
Yes.
hub/heaven.
Yeah.
And then what's explained in this one is no, what actually happened was Gaea woke up the clone, but imprinted that memory.
Yes.
So yeah, it turns out there's still no evidence that there's actually a soul or an afterlife.
Yeah. So again, it could be the same thing with Sirocco rising up at the end. It could be a memory that's
Yeah.
getting stuck in after the fact. Yeah.
And now going way back, previous book, but there's a moment where Gaea offers to bring Gabby back.
Yes.
She's trying to
Oh my
smooth
God.
things over with
Ultimate
Rocky.
temptation.
And Rocky ends up going, you know what? She would hate it. It's like, okay, pause, time out. How do you know it hasn't already happened? How do you know you aren't already a cloned meat puppet and not the original Rocky? Because you know some of what you've been through already on the journey to, so that. But okay, she makes the noble decision, and it furthers the plot.
Yeah.
But I'm like, but how do you know it didn't already happen? Especially when Gabby's like, I've been here before.
Yes.
Right. I lived through this for 20 years, which clearly she didn't because we've got external evidence of the Earthship coming up and talking to them.
So that's it. So that's something we talked about in the last episode. Is that experience, Gabby's experience in the, I don't know what they call it, the rind, when Ringmaster gets captured in book 1, and they're under there for a while, and Gabby experiences it as 20 years, 20 lived years in her own mind, sort of in a sensory deprivation chamber, slowly going insane and trying to hold on to her sanity. That is what prepares her to survive in the hub. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful callback from book 3 all the way to book 1 to just a throwaway detail.
Yep. Well, and the same thing with the red line.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Again, that was a sentence in the first book that ends up being profoundly important. Or less important, depends on how you look at it, right? Because it turns out that the Gaea presence is actually almost irrelevant to the continuing functioning of the wheel, that the red line is independent of that. Gaea is some sort of interface in a way. And now Gabby is that interface.
And the red line is kind of fascinating. We talk about what's the physical reality of, do we need a particle accelerator? Do we need this and that, and the limited mass and such. But the red line is specifically called out as non-Euclidean. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not just in a curved space-time Einstein way, but something seriously weird is happening at the red line. Yeah, which opens up all sorts of possibilities. So that's fascinating. It always makes me wonder how much of this Varley had planned from book 1, and how much of it is like, I need a solution for this. Well, what about that red line that I mentioned? Could I do something with that?
If you just threw in a few things hoping that they would pay off somewhere down the road.
There's an improv technique called a nugget, where you want to make a strong exit as a character because you feel like the scene is over, but you feel like, for story reasons, the scene has to continue. So as you're walking off stage, you say, Berlin. And then the person goes, Berlin, don't talk to me about Berlin. And that gives them the opportunity to just make up a whole whatever that keeps you on stage.
Right. I thought this was just fun. Mm-hmm. This is early in the book, and Rocky is setting out to begin her long-term mission here. And she's going through her packing. So she had learned many things in her long life, One was to be as comfortable as you can at all time. And that meant dry boots, even if one had to sleep underwater. He's got the same thing highlighted. With satisfaction, she opened her pack and retrieved them. It was a wonderful pack, and they were wonderful boots. In her ranking of important things, dry boots came far ahead of food and slightly before water.
Yeah.
This is somebody that has her priorities down.
Yes. It's interesting. And I think, boots are so important because once your feet are gone, you're done.
Yeah.
Although we also learn later that Sirocco's priorities are what they are because she can go without food and water for days and days with no discomfort whatsoever. And she's got access to a pool of eternal youth, fountain of youth. Yeah.
Only one, though.
Yeah, only one. Yeah, there's only one left.
Only one left.
Yeah.
There used to be one in every area, but they all got shut off when she quit.
Yeah.
Except for the one
in Oceanus with the dead brain.
Was it Oceanus
or was it Dion?
Dion. I think it was Dion.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't know Oceanus is dead.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
Right. That's one of the reveals. The big reveals along the way is that there was no uprising. That Oceanus simply died.
Yeah. There is so much in this book, but I have a couple other notes. Once we mentioned this when Sirocco and Gaea are having their plotting session with the angels to get them on board. They engage in ritual sex, and this again is another, for me, a callback to Ringworld. This is a custom of Ringworld, is the practice of Rishartha, where when intelligent creatures of different species meet each other, they have sex. And it's a way of saying, I recognize you as an equal. And then what that sex is going to depend a lot on what that creature is, and whether you're compatible sexually, then it's actual sex. And if you're not, then it's just kind of like some sort of sexual sort of display. And we say that counts. Yeah. So that was interesting to me. And then, this is something I mentioned last time, but I have the quote here. And it's not from book 2. It's from page 490 of book 3. So it was way off. Gabby's talking about Jean. She says, it makes me feel ashamed because, see, if there's a miracle here, it's in how much he resisted and for how long. Even to coming here, the one place in the wheel where Gaea doesn't ever look. Yeah. She still gets reports from the mole, but she pretends they're coming from somewhere else. So this is Gabby talking about Jean resisting the impulse, the evil influence of this thing that she has implanted in Jean's brain.
Now, when we talk about the things in the brain, we're introduced to that. When do they pull Snitch out of Rocky's brain?
We were talking about that.
I don't remember if it's the late second book or early third book. But so you've got the Titanides doing complex brain surgery. Well, all right, so we'll move past that, even though we know that bronze is the limit of their metalworking skills. And they pull this thing out, and it survives. And moves on. And then we find out it's not the only one out there, right? So the one in Jean ends up being very important in the final battle.
Yeah.
Was there a third one?
I don't remember a third one. I remember the one in Jean, and there was one, and presumably there was one in Gabby also, but that's rendered irrelevant in the second book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, those things were the idea that there would be an actual living personality generating thing inside, growing inside your head and feeding intel directly to Gaea.
And that's actually a fun thing. So it was never supposed to be discovered. So it never need to be able to speak or to have a face, right? It could have just been some sort of blind worm sitting in there, acting as an organic radio. But in fact, Gaea gives it both a personality and a voice and a face, so it can talk and survive on its own. As just one more example of her bleak humor. Yeah. So, yeah.
Snitch, of course, is a alcoholic, which we don't know if he was created that way or if it's just the result of spending 70 years inside of the alcoholic wizard.
Yes.
But the relationship there, the brutality with which she treats it, I mean, you can totally see where it comes from, but at a certain point in the book, they're both like, aren't you tired of this? Yeah, I'm tired of this.
Yeah.
I don't want you to beat me anymore. I'll just cooperate.
I have one more Snitch thing. This is my last quote from the book. So when Gaea loses, and because she's created a context of a movie, she's she's playing a war movie. She has to come up with a last line. And so she's going, what are we going to last? She had to consider in advance. She's thinking about classic Looney Tunes cartoon words, too lighthearted. There was Rosebud, too arty, too obscure. In the end, she reverted to the B movie she loved so well. Mother of mercy, is this the end of Gaea? And she died.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, if nothing else, he's faithful to the movie illusions
Yes.
all the way through.
Yeah. I got nothing else on Demon. Do you have anything else you want to say?
There
Other-
was, you know,
other
I
than
feel
Wow.
like, yeah, I mean, Wow is a good one. I mean, this book was, yeah, I mean, the trilogy is epic, but of the three, Demon is definitely the most epic book in
Yes.
terms of span and score and cast and whatnot. Man, I really am sad that my impression of this book was so negative that I never went back to read this again, because I have really enjoyed going through these three books.
Well, that's good.
It's
glad
just been fantastic.
because this was your suggestion. Normally, our policy here is we'll pick one author, maybe one author per season, or one book per author per season, and not sort of like dive deeper. And then this was Tom's suggestion. It's like, hey, let's do the whole trilogy, which was a surprise to me because Tom did not like this trilogy.
Yeah.
So
Well, so many. I mean, we've done several first books.
Yes.
You know, and I'm always kind of disappointed because when I read the first book, I want to move on through the trilogy.
Yeah.
You know, but not always the time to do that before the next round of podcasts come around. So, yeah, I think this worked out pretty well.
well, congratulations to you for being open-minded enough to dive back in, and
This has just turned out well in every possible way.
and your reward is yes, you get to experience this wonderful, wonderful trilogy.
I think these may well find their way onto my favorite list after a few more years.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Once I get another reading or two under my belt.
Yeah, they really hold up on every reading, which is one of our definitions of what makes a favorite here. It's like, you know, you can read a book when you're young and you come back to it and go, ugh, no, I was young and tasteless then. I don't know what I was thinking. These books, I've read these over the span of decades, and they hold up for me on every single reading. So, yeah.
Well, I fear that my next choice may well fall into that first category.
What is it?
This is a book that I read repeatedly as a youth in late grade school and even early high school. It's actually part of a trilogy, but we're just going to read the first one. But it has been out of print for a very long time, and I just last week discovered it's now available on Kindle. And for a very reasonable price.
Love it when that happens.
So we are going way back. Under the Green Star by Lynn Carter.
I don't know this book.
Well, something to look forward to.
All right, looking forward to it.
See you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.